What do you do? I think that what you do till it happens is there's a way to help it, and I'm vague on this, but it's where I'm working. You do something with language. You prepare language to receive it. You build a bassinet out of language to receive the alchemical child. And this is what we're doing. This conversation could not have happened 20 years ago, not anywhere. So that means that we are like summoning the alchemical object by talking about it. It is becoming more and more inevitable by forming opinions about it. That's why I have such faith in it, because there is a continuous knitting together around the assumption that it must exist. I think that's how things come into existence, through focused expectation, So we are literally invoking it. And the way you invoke it is by having the experience through hallucinogens or whatever works for you. That's one part of the work. The other part of the work is building a consensus through talk, so that you and I talking about, why do you think it's this way? Why does time have to end? This is the work itself.
It's the creation of a myth.
Yes. When the myth is perfect, the myth will be real.
I share Cass' comfort about sitting around waiting for the millennium and dreaming about it. It sort of forestalls it. I just have to look out this window and just think how timeless that is out there. Mm-hmm. How primeval and unchanged the cliff is in that water.
But what about suffering humanity? What about the historical dilemma? I feel so...
Well, you see it as a dilemma. It's the way it is.
Well,
people have always suffered, and there's no reason to suppose that they won't always suffer.
Well, aren't we fortunate it isn't us?
Exactly. That is correct. Some suffer more than others, and we are among the fortunate, for whatever reason.
I think that historically we're at a point, which we've never been before, where the demonic alchemical changes leading to mass destruction by nuclear holocaust that's never been in existence before in the world. And if that's not going to get us, maybe AIDS will, which is the modern plague.
Right.
At any rate, I would assume that you're talking about the Deus ex machina comes from sort of a pessimism that we've reached this point in history through technology, demonic technology, and that we can't save ourselves.
We can't save ourselves without contacting our inner resources. We can't save ourselves by the methods that are currently being used at the top. I'm not pessimistic. I do think people are the sine qua non of it, so that it isn't a passive waiting for the millennium. It's a friend of mine said once that, and the word apocalypse hasn't been used yet this morning, but the apocalypse and the millennium are brother and sister. He said, we must live as though the apocalypse has already happened. That's the only way to get beyond its shadow. And maybe that's what you're doing and mentioning, that you have confronted the problem, surmounted the problem, and now live in the post-problem space.
Well, it seems to me that the apocalypse happens every day, just like the millennium happens every day for different people in different places, in different situations. The apocalypse has happened in Nicaragua, and it's happened in Beirut. They don't need a bigger one than that, It hasn't happened here, and to a lot of people in the world, this is the millennium here. California is just definitely it.
That's true.
Apocalypse really means the telling of the story, doesn't it? I mean, it can be an apocalypse of joy.
That's true. That's true.
And what we're forgetting is maybe we're the ones chosen for the joy. And we're not really letting it come through, except as we're learning little bit by little.
To release into the acceptance of your position.
We are it. And language is very important because going into the work, as far as I'm concerned, the set depends on what I intended. I'm perfectly willing to look at the negative and not get attached to it. And that's part of the practice.
Yes.
And then to see what comes. The birth of the child in heaven.
I have come to see the suffering that goes on, especially at this point when we do have the resources that we do, and whether that's external suffering in the form of war or people starving or intrapsychic suffering, as being the external manifestation of what goes on in our collective human psyche. And it's like things originate at that psychic level and then they manifest through the world and through ourselves. We're that vehicle through which it comes. And whether we look on an individual level at what goes on in terms of the ego, defenses, all of that complex of structure that creates us with the kind of viewpoint that it does, manifests in the world, and then that gets reflected back to us. And I've almost come to see the bomb at this point as being a very graphic and accurate depiction that is confronting us with what we have done on the intrapsychic level, collectively. Because we have, in trying to erect a defense, it has itself become the threat, which has cut us off from what we supposedly wanted to protect. So it seems to me that it's initially at the individual intrapsychic level, and then by sharing that in some fashion, it begins to make some energetic alterations in that collective human psyche, but then the external conditions on this earth are going to begin to reflect that.
I think it's useful also to look at this in terms of the model that Stan Groff has put out, which relates also generally to the process of psycho-spiritual transformation, which you can see in all kinds of disciplines in yoga and shamanism and alchemy and so on, involving the process of birth. We've all experienced the millennium, the apocalypse, and the millennium, and sort of the simultaneity of the end of a world when we were in the womb. We experience that as absolutely the end, but it's really been simultaneous with the beginning. So as you're saying, it's the to confront that internally, so we don't project it out. But there's something about that, and that's a kind of biological blueprint of it. That's a biological level of this archetype of transformation. But it doesn't seem to elucidate certain phenomena regarding these ideas in psychedelic states where you were talking about the marbles spinning in your hand. I had an experience once with LSD and a crystal where that exactly was the phenomenon. The woman had dropped a crystal in my hand, and at that instant, the crystal, the whole universe was contained in the crystal. And it was, at the moment she did it was a very nice sunny day in Santa Cruz. And when it landed in my hand, it got very windy and it sort of darkened all around, and it's like this tremendous release of energy. Up till that point, I've been considering this birth model that doesn't quite. There are many other levels to it beyond this sort of biological. But the biological one is extremely significant because it's universal. It's something that we've all gone through this process.
It's a little bit after 12. Shall we take a break and come back? Or what time do they start serving lunch? I can't remember. 12:30. Well, maybe we should just keep after this till 12:30. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, what time do we start then?
3, I believe. Yeah. Anybody else have anything more on this?
It's not making a point or it's like I feel as though I'm becoming something else in my own nervous system. Certainly in my mind, I've seen the process over the last 15 years, but I feel like my tissues, my nervous system, my cells, everything's becoming something different. And then while you were talking, I flashed on Findhorn transmissions, and they talked about the burning off of impurities that's in the chemistry lab, which, if you translate it into Christian terms, would be the separating of the wheat from the chaff. And at first I felt very sad about it, and I realized that no energy is destroyed, that people who have not passed a certain line of consciousness will go on to evolve at another point. But right now it's like that's baggage.
Yeah.
And that we've got, I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that. I'm working a lot with systems that have to do with really entering your own nervous system. But I think it's a combination of things that I feel lighter. I'm just becoming something else.
Yes, well, one of the ways to think about this alchemical transformation, which is sort of a middle ground, is to think of it as a transformation of the physical body, that actually you are changing. It's like the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly, but it's real. And these, you can make as materialistic a model of it as you want. I mean, you can say that psilocybin is a metamorphotic enzyme of some sort. In the invisible landscape is the most materialistic setting out of these ideas, because there we believe that it was actually something that you had to do to yourself, to your body, with sound, in a certain state of biodynamic saturation with these tryptamine compounds, and that then there was a way to lock molecules into the DNA to shift the resonant sphere of perception so that you would enter the millennium. Basically, the millennium then becomes a form of broadcast radiation coming out of your own body. And this is both a spiritual and a materialistic model for it. It makes clear that it's a state of mind, but it also makes clear that it has a chemical, molecular and chemical basis for it. My notion of the millennium is to live in the imagination, to go where things are as you think they are, and then to explore what that would be like, not over the first half hour, but over a long period of time.
Not be afraid of your own creativity.
Well, you would quickly learn that, it would be an enormous uprush of creativity. It's like, in some ways, I think, the push to go into space is black and empty and a wonderful place to put things. It's sort of like the inside of your mind. And so these engineering schemes for these 50-mile-long cities with gardens and waterfalls and all this, what they're saying is, outer space is the imagination. We will build these habitats, these structures. The question is, shall we build them between Earth and space, or shall we build them north of the amygdala? And it will be the same kind of thing. The imagination, as William Blake saw so clearly, is where we want to be. We are the creatures of the imagination, and it is the realm of beauty and fascination and creativity. And the trick then is how to be there and be here and be in Tao in both places.
When you say imagination like that, do you mean, I have this sense sometimes that if or when this planet goes, we will exist in some kind of purely psychic or spiritual substratum like we exist now in a physical one, and before that we were in a sort of a fluid one, I guess, in the room, and before that, I don't know. So this evolution in our own development proceeds from kind of, physical dense thing. When we're children, that's what we're into, is, the body and senses, and then as we mature, we get more intellectual, and then hopefully more spiritual, and then even more. So when you say this thing about, doesn't Hilliard Nisha then have that idea that the omega point or something is just purely psychic kind of substratum?
Yes, it's a physical world that is only psychic. It isn't a land of wraiths and shades. It's just that physics It's this world, except that physics has been replaced with imagination.
I'm still not clear on this world part. I mean, will there be mountains and trees? Or
If you want them, there will be.
What will nature do if we live entirely in the imagination? In your version, I mean, I have my version.
In my version?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, in my best version, the entire technological backup of the planet, all the databases and everything, is put into a grain of sand, which is put on a beach on a South Pacific island and lost. And then everybody is naked, healthy, and happy wherever they are. And if you need something, it appears at your right hand. And if you want to be somewhere, you are there. If you want to be something, you are it. You become thought, visualized. And you are also this perfect being in a perfect world, living a life perfectly integrated into nature. Now, to what degree this has already been achieved is a question. Again, Club Med, but even more so, the shamans in the rainforest we think of as, however we think of them, but occasionally they say things which suggest that for them this is a reality. I mean, one day we were walking with Don Fidel to his house in the forest, and apropos of nothing, he said, this is the path that Christ walked. And then you look around, say, damned if it isn't the Christ, the path that Christ walked. Well, it means that Don Fidel lived in the imagination. He saw things this way. He was in all history, was present. He only knew maybe a little bit of it, but all he knew of history was present. So, he was walking with Elijah.
Whose imagination did Don Fidel live in?
His own.
Where were you and
I was, this is like the Leibnizian question about the monads. Every monad had a unique soul, but the monads each had their distinct perspective in the way that the infinite number of points that fill this room all have a definably unique perspective on the room. So it isn't a matter of will my dream step on your dream? See, that's what history is. One dream, and if you don't agree with my dream, I'm going to kill you and round up your relatives, and because there can only be a few dreams on this planet. But there should be an infinite number of dreams, and that's what the imagination allows. At my mother's knee, I learned that if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. I am a beggar, so consequently I'm very interested in having wishes become horses and flying saucers and all of these things. How else can we solve poverty except make wishes be horses?
And in the practical sense, I've had an experience of wishing I could help heal somebody and really feeling very desperate that I couldn't. And finally thinking, well, I can't do it. And going off and going my own way and finding I got sick, which I don't do ever. Encapsulating it and having some experiences there, which were quite dramatic. Within a month of that was when I had the chance to go through this near-death experience with this person. And it's uncanny, the experiences that she went through, that in my day and a half of being sick, I went through before.
Mm-hmm.
And in some way, what I cleared, I became the seed for something that went out. Mm-hmm. And I no longer had to worry about what my effect was. All that I had to do was keep clear inside myself. And at the end of my illness, I felt as if I had had the most wonderful experience in the world. It was hell, but it was a relieving experience. I needed to learn that before I could help somebody else. I could help somebody else because I learned it. So it really takes it back to the individual right now.
alchemical riches are better than gold, but it's all interiorized. It's the discovery of feelings, explorable dimensions that are where the spirit literally takes flight, you know, and then that anchors a life, and we presume it could anchor a society. In fact, presume that these shamanic societies in the rainforest, the reason they don't have material culture was because it clutters things up so much, and then you can only have one culture, you know.
Well, their millennium is very, or whatever it is, their meta-stable magic is totally dependent on a clear communication with nature all the time. They can't stop paying attention to every detail of every plant and every weather and every animal and everything.
So it's still relationship. That's an important element.
And language.
And if they build buildings around themselves, if they put walls on the buildings, which they don't, and these people that we were saying, cuts off so much information, so much communication. How can they keep it together like they've got it, you know? It has to be simple.
If it's not simple, you haven't gotten it yet.
So I was curious, this is kind of a technical question, but what I was asking before is, then you presume that nature exists, that the earth and the nature that it is clothed in exists apart from our imagination enough that we could all live in our imagination and still take for granted that nature is here and supporting us? Or do we look at a tree and will that it becomes something else that pleases us?
No, because this is someone else's imagination. Her imagination.
And so tell us about that.
Well, so we are in her imagination trying to create our own realms of imagination, which are for us as much an expression of ourself as this universe is an expression of herself.
Not just the earth.
Life.
The earth or the
The
universe?
earth, no, I think it's everything. It's everything. You know, everything is wedded and wed together, and it's like there are layers of connection. Some are dense, some are tenuous, but everything is connected, and we are simply imaging. And this is a good old alchemical doctrine: as above, so below. We are trying to create an arena where we are the god or the goddess, but it need not trample on anyone. But if we could have it, we would be so satisfied that it might inspire us to decent behavior. And so it's this effort to give people what they want so that they will allow other people to have what they want. And people are so acquisitive that apparently you have to give everybody everything. Well, to do that, you have to have a different kind of dimensional space-time manifold than we have here, because here we have the mine-yours problem. So that's historical time. We have to break out of that into a place where contradiction is no problem. And that's why it's so hard to think about it, because it transcends the notion of contradiction, which is a three-dimensional or linguistically three-dimensional notion.
And because we live on a, to speak hierarchically, lower level than that, I think that we do very much live in our imagination, and that's what we see manifest. It's just that the dark side of human nature is forced to be reckoned with, and that governs a lot of what we find ourselves presented with.
That's right.
It's an aspect of ourselves that has to be acknowledged.
Shadow.
Yes.
And the dark side must be equally present in the imagination. So I don't know. I mean, can we
it's a force,
forever naked, happy on a beach with fruit falling out of the trees in your imagination without
Scratching yourself.
Yes. I mean, won't it be just like this, except different?
Well, it will be just like this, but different for the first hour. But then you begin this notion of being able to do everything I mean, here's a fantasy exercise which is very instructive, I think. Imagine you had a small object that could do anything. Well, then make a list of what you would do with it. Well, so then people say, well, I need a blue cashmere sweater, so I'll have it turn into a blue cashmere sweater. Done. Say, So this game is really not the 3 wishes game, but the 10,000 wishes game. Well, so then you say, well, can the walls be water? Then it's done. So, and in other words, what begins to happen is you begin to push out against the world and you discover no limits. The impeding force has been removed. So then you say, well, then what are the limits? Answer, no limits. So then you say, well, then what can I be? Answer, anything. Well, then what shall I be? And then you say, well, can I be a small dog? So then you're a small dog. And you say, well, but then can I be 10 small dogs? Yes. Can I be 10 small dogs in a coral reef? Yes. Well, 45 minutes of that and you can't remember where you started.
You can also say, right? Can I be a pirate? Can I be a murderer? Can I be a slave driver? Can I be a robber?
And yes, and you would be all those things, but these are sort of... But those are the suggested roles that come with the instruction book. Say, be a mass murderer, pirate, Nazi general. Say, okay, I've been all of those things, but now I want to be something else. And what it does is it begins to unfurl the imagination. You say, now I know what I want to be. I want to be a swarm of space-going cetacean cybernauts, able to move vertically in 5 dimensions, able to... You say, oh, wow, now I'm getting the feeling of what this thing is. And then you begin to move out into discovering, what are we really? What are we if we could... What is it? It says in Finnegan's Wake, it says, if you want to be phoenixed, come and be parked, meaning die. Upnient, prospector, you sprout all your worth and woof your wings. So it's this notion of, if you want to be phoenixed, meaning if you want to become a transformative mythical creature unlimited by any constraints, he's saying you have to die. I'm saying maybe we can find a slightly less drastic way, but you must die to history. History has to be put behind. I love that exercise, this what could you be if you could be anything, because so quickly everything becomes unrecognizable. I mean, imagine the kind of design your home. This is an exercise in Vajrayana Buddhism. They say, the method of the Anuttara Yoga Tantra is they say, imagine yourself to be a god. And they invite, in other words, what is called schizophrenic delusion of grandeur. They say, imagine yourself to be a god. Now imagine the abode appropriate to this god. You say, well, it begins in some kind of Arabian Nights extravagance. Let the floors be carpeted in emeralds. Let damask hangings. But then you soon exhaust all architectural styles, precious stones and Hollywood, and you begin to push off, and you say it's unlimited. The beauty of the imagination is unlimited. I mean, maybe for 10 minutes I want to be a Nazi general, but for 10,000 years I want to be the 9-dimensional cetacean philosopher in the planet with the triple suns and the so forth. So realizing how beautiful things could be if we were released from the constraint of 3-dimensional space. This is why I don't think heaven is easily imagined, because after anybody has been there an hour, they don't look much like Uncle Ned or Aunt Frida anymore, because they've begun shedding and shedding and shedding, and what is emerging is the soul. and it becomes less and less recognizable to people. It is the secret self, the anthroposophic Adam that is being carried around within us. And the psychedelic experience is so powerfully related to this because if you get it right, meaning not every trip and at some dosage level and whatever is right for you, you enter that place. You say, I can do anything with my mind. If I want to recollect past memories, I can. But what I really want to do is see things that I could not previously imagine. I want to go beyond myself. Show me that which I cannot conceive. And then it does. So you're right, I couldn't conceive it. Show me another, and another, and another. So that, in that sense, it seems to anticipate this ocean of imagination into which the post-historical person could swim.
I don't know, wait, what if history is just one element of this thing? And we're just
it's a dimension.
Yeah.
It's the edge of a cube. History is the edge of a cube.
Because as you're describing all these things, you're still talking about a true time, so I want to be this, nine-dimensional thing. But what is that, the implication of that?
Well, the implications are what I'm making a living off of. The implications of all this stuff. What are the implications of the endless self-transforming capacity of the human mind for imagery? I mean, why is it on a psychedelic drug you can see more art in 25 minutes than the human race has produced in 5,000 years? Just tearing past you, It means that we are operating in a very limited dimension vis-a-vis our capabilities. We have great hearts and great souls, and only very rarely do we get a chance to unfold them. The poor and hungry and downtrodden and oppressed of the world, never. We, the privileged elites, the educated, occasionally and fleetingly. But the real potential and capacity of the species is not being tapped at all. I mean, we are not recognizing that the greatest resource that we have is humanness, and that it isn't what we think it is. The extraterrestrial fantasies we have of alien contact and that sort of thing are pedestrian indeed compared to the real nature of human beings, which we need, which history is the very ugly way of handling the debate about what shall we be, because those who have the guns decide and those who don't go along. Robert.
Fascinated broad stroke on suffering. Downtrodden and that sort of thing. And last on I was saying to Teresa, when she was the lady that does all the work with leopards, when she was asked, she had a tour going, and she was talking about how beautiful these people were. That she was, don't you see the beauty in the leopards? And she was asked, she says, well, if they're so spiritually uplifted and that sort of thing, how come we don't have this kind of suffering in the States? And they say that a tear came to their eyes. He says, because you're not worthy.
Because you're not worthy. Yes, but Mother Teresa is a saint.
So when you talk in terms of the downtrodden and the suffering, that brought me that to mind. Like, it definitely kind of a little askew ever since I heard that, when I first heard that.
Well, you mean, what did she mean, that we're not worthy?
We think we got everything. I mean, they are the downtrodden. We seem to take this attitude. But in fact, what did she mean when she said that we weren't worthy to have that kind of stuff?
What did she mean, Mom?
Well, I was just thinking of the Chronicle, a newspaper which we don't want to read, but I did happen to see an article yesterday which took a lot of courage to look at. And it's the story of a little child who was badly burned on some island, I don't think it was Hawaii, but somewhere, and brought here for endless operations. She was 2 and she was burned in her crib, and 2 people, foster parents, have taken her on, and I mean, to even look at the pictures of her was hard for me. But evidently her eyes, I had to work to open her eyelids, but her eyes glow. And she dances around and she laughs and she just go to bed with the thing in her mouth to stretch her lips, and she's burnt brown. And I thought about those parents, and the story of them is they couldn't have done it, except that all of a sudden the man had some kind of a mystical experience. God came and spoke to him. He knew his life was changing, and a few days later, somebody said something about needing a foster parent, and there he is. So something's changing. We are becoming worthy. And the Chronicle published it. Something is really changing.
Yeah, I think it's something about pain returning us to our source. You know, like you were saying, the millennium is the end, historical time, and you were saying something that I was hearing, that we are living our end, our beginning, and the transition all simultaneously over and over and over again. And as the earth grows in travail, as we suffer, we also are giving birth to a memory of our source. When you were talking about, I don't remember what it was you were talking about, it was a series of images of I want, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
That is how I've heard a number of spiritualists describe what it is in the beyond, however you want to define or characterize that. That soul substance, which is, at times we look like Uncle Ned as you were crossing the threshold, but for a while it was just this vibration, whatever that is, where all is possible. And babies, I wonder if you had this experience, babies, as they are born, still have a memory of that, of the immediacy of a desire and its fulfillment. And I can't articulate what it is.
I mean, because the uterine environment would be like that.
I'm saying beyond that. I'm saying before the uterine experience. Before incarnating.
Well, we come and go to that cosmic ocean. I mean, maybe the thing that we don't want to face is that the solution is directly in front of you. Mm-hmm. That you're going to die, and then you're going to find out why it all made sense, and that the transhistorical dimension, that's it, and that's what Joyce meant when he said, if you want to be Phoenix, come and be part. That all the anxiety, that what we are really trying to do is remove the barrier between the distinction of living and dying. That history is where the living are, the millennium is where the dead are, and we want to somehow tear down the distinction between these two places. And we can't.
I think we can.
Well, our best people are working on it. Either we can or we can't, but we are working on it.
In a sense, isn't that what we are doing when we meditate, when we dream, when we take a psychedelic substance? We are moving beyond those watery walls, and we are experiencing it, now.
Yeah.
Not in death, not out of the body, but in our body, in our consciousness, right now. Accessing either a memory in our unconscious or something else, but it is happening right now. I mean, as you were talking, I was experiencing it right now.
Uh-huh.
And I think that, yes, we are trying to tear down those barriers, and I think we can. Maybe that is why we're all here, that is the quest.
No, you
Well,
want
there
to be
is
dead
no-
without dying
You want to be alive.
forever.
Let's start cleaning up on your language. If you ask the question, show me what I can't imagine, maybe what you might say is, show me what I haven't yet imagined.
Right.
Because everything's possible.
That's right.
But it seems
They can't.
Borges has a story, I don't remember which one it is, but the basic idea of it is that no individual member of a species is freed, whatever that means, until the species is extinct. So that everyone is jamming up in some holding area somewhere, trying to push the buttons, basically, because the completion is, the earth swept clean of life. I don't say that, and I rarely even mention it in public because it just drives people over the brink. I mean, I've had people in tears over this one, but nevertheless, it is odd that death is so persistent,
Because it's a living form.
Yes.
Yeah, death is going on. Cells in our body are dying, and everything's dying.
So
immediacy to that, but we don't focus.
that's right. We don't worry about the consciousness. So maybe the body is the placenta of the soul, and that what we are doing is fussing over the fact that we can't have it quite the way we want, but that it will all be unfolded quite the way we want, but on somebody else's terms. This is a possibility. I said at a talk I gave here once, what mushroom is it that grows at the end of history? Is it the Stropharia cubensis filled with psilocybin? Or is it the mushroom of Fermi and Oppenheimer and Teller? Or perhaps all mushrooms are the same? We should go to lunch to have mushrooms. Stroganoff. And we'll regather at 3 o'clock and hope that Dennis and Sheila and Eduardo are here, and it will be different.